Okay, y'all. So I didn't get no time to practice because if I practice, then I'm not gonna do it, and then I'm gonna still be walking in disobedience, and that's just not what we're trying to do here. Um, this is the season of walking in obedience, which means making content and sharing the things that Holy Spirit has shared with me with you guys. Okay, so I can officially welcome you guys to this new podcast. It's crazy, but it's kingdom, where I just want to share some perspectives that I have about the kingdom, about Christianity, some crazy perspectives, um, some crazy concepts that I feel like are true from what I've read and what I've received um, concerning every aspect of our lives. And my prayer is, and I wrote this down because write it down, write the vision, make it plain. So I pray that God is able to use this podcast as a way to spread the gospel of the kingdom, a way to heal and begin the healing process of his children's hearts, so that we as a church will be able to walk in the fullness of what we were called to. And that women also, specifically women, would be healed and empowered. So this is season 1 of It's Crazy, but It's Kingdom. And my name is TT, and we're on a mission. We're on a mission to share the gospel of the kingdom, not the gospel of the church, not the gospel of Christianity, the gospel of the kingdom. And for our first episode, I just want to do something simple, something slight. And I want to talk about so a little bit of background for me. Right now, I'm a master's student at CBU, a social work master's student, and I have my undergrad degree in psychology and sociology. And so, for me, mental health means a lot. I think our mental health has to do a lot with our spirituality, has to do a lot with our spirits. Um, and the church doesn't talk a lot about mental things, and I feel like God has called us into all areas. That includes social work, that includes being doctors, that includes being masseuses, he has called us into the whole world to share the gospel. And in order to do that, we have to know all of these things. And so I feel like one of the things that I have been called into is mental health. That's my first time saying it, but right now he's calling me to social work. And at the moment, I am striving to be a therapist and get my license in therapy with my master's of social work. But we make plans and God laughs, okay? And he changes everything for our good. So that's where we're at now. And today I want to talk about um, this concept of being like mentally bound in the past, right? And I just want to start off with something that I've heard about maybe a few years ago. And have you ever? We're just gonna go here. Have you ever wondered how circuses get these big animals to obey and listen and stay in their cages and things of that nature? Like, have you ever thought about, like, elephants are so much more bigger than us. How are we as humans able to control them in settings like a circus, right? And I learned how they do it. So what happens is they get these elephants when they're babies. They get these elephants when they're babies, and they put chains around their feet. And every time the elephant tries to, oh my God, it speaks so much. It speaks so much to us spiritually. Every time the elephant tries to move or leave, the chain on their feet creates bruises. Like, they can't go. They can't leave. They can't leave because they're chained up. And it leaves bruises, and the chains literally cuts into their skin, and they're bleeding. And they keep these chains on the elephants until the elephant just gives up. The elephant has no more strength, no more power, and they literally mentally break down the elephant through this physical chain. And so the elephant believes that when there's a chain around their foot, they can't leave. But we all know that once the elephant gets bigger, they're probably able to break through that chain. And at this point, when you see the elephants now, they're not using chains, they're just using ropes. And the thing is, the elephant is still in the mindset that they can't break free, even if it is a rope and not a chain. And so, because they've been trained since they were little that they can't get away, and that if they try to get away, these chains will create bruises, when they grow up and get big enough to actually break free, they're mentally still at that state to where they feel like they can't break free. And so, because they were chained up when they were little, and they had these bruises, these marks, and this pain when they were smaller, when they get bigger and they're able to be free, their mindset is still, this is, if I try to run away from this, I'm going to get hurt. If I try to leave this state, if I try to leave, if I try to free myself, I'm going to get hurt. And I feel like that speaks to us as children of God spiritually. The enemy does not care how old you are. He does not wait till you're bigger to attack you. He attacks you when you're smaller. He sends people to abuse you spiritually, mentally, physically when you're smaller. So when you get older, you still kind of have that mindset of, I can't be free. And you're literally mentally stuck in this state. So when you actually try to walk towards freedom, that's why we tend as people to be in this cycle, this loop of like, freedom looks like it's right here, but I have this block, I can't get there. And for me personally, one of those things was fear. As a child, I mentally, the enemy would attack me a lot of times in my sleep, and it would bring upon this fear. I would have nightmares, like not even just nightmares, night terrors, to the point where I'm jumping out of my bed crying, knocking on my mom's door because I literally can't sleep. And my dreams for me are very vivid. And so, for this is a prime example of me being attacked when I was smaller. And now at the age of 25, I just recently had had a little night terror, but I was like waking up in the middle of the night, like constantly, like every 30 to 45 minutes, couldn't sleep. And then I would have these images of demons in my room, and these images of things coming to attack me, and these images of just things happening to me as I'm laying in the bed. And it's like, I know who God is. I know God loves me. I know in my mind that I'm free from that. That I'm free from fear, that God doesn't give us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And while I know that, I still have this deep feeling of terror. And it's because growing up, I had that chain on my foot, right? Mentally, I had that chain of my foot. Oh, I'm trying to break free, and I'm still having night terrors, or I'm going to people and no one can help me, or just things of that nature. So as an adult, in my heart and in my mind, I still have that same concept. And that's just not a spiritual thing. Like, this is a trauma, basically. And there's a lot of studies on trauma, and it's something that I'm learning about in class now, about how trauma during our childhood affects us when we get older. And I can't get into all the sciencey things, but there is a connection that is not that's it's not while it is spiritual, it affects your physical body, and it affects your mind, and the way your brain reacts with your mind, and in your heart and your whole body, right? And so, back to what I was saying. For me, it showed up in my fear and in sleep. And while I knew that I had nothing to be afraid of, in my heart I would still have those thoughts and those feelings of being scared when I would wake up 2 3 times and can't go to sleep, and my body, I'm sweating, I'm waking up in sweats and all of this. And so I feel like the enemy, we are the elephant. And when we are children, the enemy puts chains around us, and this chains is trauma, it's mental abuse, it's physical abuse, it's emotional abuse. Those are the chains that God puts on us. Oh, well, that the, not God, oh, I apologize, that the enemy puts on us. And so as adults, we're sitting here in this cycle and we're being told you can have freedom for that, but we don't necessarily understand why we're big elephants, or understanding that we don't actually know that we actually have power over that thing. Just like the elephants in the circus don't understand their power because of what happened to them when they were children. And so we don't understand that in life, the enemy has just a rope around our ankles. He no longer has the power. He no longer has the power to overcome us. But we're still stuck in the mindset of, oh, this happened to me when I was a child. And so I know for a fact I can't be free because of what happened to me as a child. But as we get older, and as we're renewed and as we're adopted into the kingdom, we become those bigger elephants. And we're actually walking around with the power inside us and not using that power to be free. And so, an example, and I just want to pull this to the Bible, an example of this for me was the Israelites when they were when they came out of Egypt. They were free. When they came out of Egypt, they were free physically. They were free physically, but mentally they were not. Mentally, because they were so used to the abuse, and the traumatic events that happened to them as a culture, they wanted to go back to their abuser. They wanted, because they weren't used, right, to, and they didn't want to go through that process of a sanctification, that process of healing that it takes to get to be mentally free. Because a lot of times we don't understand, just because we're physically free doesn't mean we're mentally free. A lot of times we're physically free, but mentally, in our head, we're not free. And the Israelites, when they were in the wilderness, while they were physically free, while they weren't slaves anymore, they still had mentality of a slave. And so when God was calling them to go through what I think was this process of, or was an example of what sanctification looks like in our lives, going through that wilderness, being taken away from everything you know, and leaving the things that connect you to your past where they're at. Eating meat connected them to their past. All the stuff that they were trying to do, all the stuff that they missed in that season of wilderness connected them to their past. And sometimes, in order to mentally break free from your past, you have to let go of the things of your past. And that season for us is really difficult as Christians. When you're a baby Christian and you know God is coming to save you, and you realize, oh my God, I'm being saved, you're all happy, just like the Israelites were. They're like, oh my God, we're being saved. The spirit of death has passed us. None of our children are dead, and we're literally being taken out of slavery. But what they didn't know, and what a lot of Christians don't know, is after you come out, after you're adopted into the kingdom, that there's this process of sanctification. And it's not just a physical thing, like it's a mental thing. Like you have to separate yourself from your past, and that sometimes means letting go of the things that you're used to being fun, and letting go of that boyfriend that emotionally abuses you, and letting go of and disconnecting yourself from family for a season, and doing things of that nature. And God calls you to a place of isolation so he could sanctify you, and so that he can give you a new heart, and so that he can help you renew your mind, because the Bible calls us to renew our minds daily. And so, in an effort to do that, we're put in a place of isolation, right? And so, all of that, all of what I just said, I know I just said a lot, but I say everything that I just said to say, if you are down and you're sad and you're upset and you can't figure out why, if you're trying to push forward and you feel like the enemy really has you in a chokehold, and you haven't got to the point of understanding your power in God, like this is really for baby Christians, and not even just for baby Christians, for Christians in general. Like, sometimes it takes it takes a process. It's a process, right? Of knowing what your chain is. Knowing what your chain is, knowing who you actually are in God, and knowing that the enemy no longer has that type of power to abuse you. And then being able to go through a process of changing your mindset. So for me, one of those things for me is like, your brain does this thing where, if you are like I'm very hypersensitive. I'm hypersensitive because my brain has made me that way in order to protect myself. And I grew up unfortunately with loving people, but who were also very emotionally abusive. So, and their parents were emotionally abusive, so it just kind of, their parents were emotionally abusive. That just runs in my family, like emotional abuse. So I am hypersensitive, right? And I can tell somebody's mood change from the slightest thing, from the slightest change in tone of voice, from the slightest, no, let me correct that. I notice, not I can tell, because I can't, because that's what I've told myself over the years. I can't tell. I can't tell. I don't know what's going through anybody's mind. That's the facts. But what I can do is I notice, not I can tell, I notice the slightest change of mood, the slightest change of tone, someone's tone, the slightest change in body language. And also, something that I am trying to break off is this thing that people do, that your brain has you do, is uh, something kind of like mimicking, right? And so, as a form of trying to, oh, you hear Riley walking in the background, as a form of protection, my body, right, my body and mind, something I didn't notice I did, has me mimic people in the room. Like, I literally mimic people in a room as a form of coping, as a form of like protection. Because if I'm able to do that, if I'm able to analyze a room and I'm able to camouflage, it's just something that I do in order to protect myself mentally. Something that my brain has me do in order to protect myself. And so, as I'm going through this process of noticing uh, that this is no longer a chain around me. This is a rope, right? I no longer have to do this. Like, I'm big enough now to protect myself. I'm big enough to pray. I'm big enough to lean on God and be dependent on God, so that I don't have to protect myself from trauma, because God is going to do that, right? But I still have those little things that I do, like mimicking, the little things that I do, like telling myself or trying to figure out what somebody's thinking in order to protect myself in a social environment. And so I'm going to therapy now, and one of the things that I've done and the things that I got better is telling myself that I really don't know what anybody is thinking. Because 9 times out of 10, if I'm in a room, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to figure out what everybody is thinking in order to protect myself. And a lot of people do that. But that brings anxiety, because then you're thinking people don't like you, and you're thinking people are thinking bad things of you, right? But that was something we did to protect ourselves as children, something we do to protect ourselves as adults, that we no longer have to do because we're the big elephant, right? We're no longer held by the chains that we were in our past before we got saved. And so this micro this microphone is very, very, very sensitive, y'all. So I'm sorry if I'm yelling at you. That's just how I talk, okay? Okay, sorry. So something I was very proud of is like I'm able to catch my thoughts now. So I'm able to hear somebody say something that would usually offend me or that would usually take me down this rabbit hole of thoughts. And I'm able to say, okay, I don't know for a fact that that person is thinking that. Like, I don't know for a fact that that person doesn't like me. Like, I know that person didn't say hey to me today, or I know that person decided to leave the room when I walked in, or I know that I noticed that this person, and these are things that literally happened. Like, I've noticed that this person got quiet when I walked in the room. I noticed that this person is talking to somebody else in code, and usually that makes me very, very anxious because I'm trying to protect myself, because I'm trying to protect myself from things that have happened to me in the past. And through my therapy, I've learned not to overanalyze things and to literally tell myself, no, they didn't say that. They didn't say this is what they're thinking. So I'm not allowed to put words or thoughts or feelings in people. Right? I'm not allowed to tell myself what somebody else is thinking or what somebody else is feeling um, anymore. Right? Because my mindset is like, I'm no longer, because I'm a child of God and because I'm a part of the kingdom, I'm no longer the person protecting myself. God is protecting me. Right? And so even if my thoughts are true, even if my thoughts of that person walked out of the room when I came in, or that person gets quiet when I'm around and they don't like me, even if that thought is true, which nine times out of 10, it's not. But even if it is true, God is going to protect me. And God is going to make sure everything that happens around me comes together for my good. Uh, and so that is me. That walking into that new mindset is me realizing that I'm a big elephant and I no longer belong in the circus. I no longer belong here. This is You can no longer hold me captive in this in the cycle. Enemy, you're no longer allowed to hold me captive in this circus of anxiety. You're no longer allowed to do that. I am now free from that circus. I realize who I am. I realize who God is in me. And I literally was like, no, this is just a rope. Let me break it. I'm bigger than this. I'm stronger than this. I'm capable to overcome this anxiety that I get from thinking that people don't like me. And so that is literally a prime example of like us being big elephants and the enemy's using these small ropes to control us mentally and emotionally. He's literally using small instances in our lives to control what we do because he can't actually he actually isn't capable of controlling our actions. He's only capable of sometimes manipulating the things around us to make us act in a way that leads to more self-destruction or sin. He can't actually do anything to you without you taking that first step. Same thing that happened in the garden. Satan don't have no power. Satan really doesn't have any power. All he does is take the power that we give him. And when we allow the things around us to have when we don't actually take the step to see what that chain was when we were little, actually dig down and see what the root of things are, the enemy is able to trick us by putting ropes around us. It's not even chains anymore, it's just ropes. He's able to control us with ropes, things that we can break free from, that we don't take the time to actually, try, like not actually try, because some of these things are traumatic, right? So this is why I think therapy is really good. But The thing is the thing I'm trying to say is that the enemy actually doesn't have as much power as we think he does, and we're not actually as weak as we think we are. And sometimes it just takes a second of realizing that it's no longer a chain around your foot, it's just a rope, and you're a big elephant. And you can actually break free from that circus. And that takes a little analyzing, and sometimes that hurts. Sometimes that's painful. Sometimes it's gonna make you cry. But I promise you guys that it's worth it. And so that is my little spiel today. Um it's crazy. It's crazy, it's crazy, it's crazy how the enemy uses little things to overpower us, and how little we think of ourselves, and how big or how powerful we think the enemy is. But it's actually the other way around. And the enemy attacked you when you were small, because he knew that would affect you when you were bigger. Just like in the circus, they put chains around elephants when they're small, because they know that when they're older, when they're bigger, when they're more powerful, um, they can be able to still use a rope, just a rope, not even a chain. It's not even a chain anymore, but they're able to use something small to keep them in that mindset. And so my homework for you would be, what's one thing or one mindset that you had before you got saved that you're still bringing into this kingdom life of yours, that you wish you could be free from? Or maybe you don't even know, maybe it's just an emotion. Maybe, like, what's this thing that's bringing you anxiety, you don't even know why you have anxiety? And I would say, take that to God. Like, why when I'm in a room do I feel like this? Take that to God. Let him be your therapist. That's what my first therapist was. My first therapist was God, and there was a lot of times where I was like, I don't know why I'm upset. And then he would show me something that happened in my childhood, and then I would cry, and then I would talk about it, and then I would look in the Word to see how I'm gonna get through it, and things of that nature. And that's how we're gonna be big elephants and break out of these fake chains, these ropes, so that we can live in the kingdom, and we can live where we're supposed to live at and how we're supposed to live, and not be circus animals for the enemy. But that's it. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy, but it's kingdom. Thank you for joining me, and I'll catch y'all on the flip side.